Good afternoon. All right. Am I audible to you at the back? Yeah, I thought so. Let us see who is trying to gag me. So we will have to wait a little while. Uh, हाँ बोलो बोलो. Yes, that whatever you gain from the last unit purchased should be matching what you lose by paying the money for it. जैसे मान लो मैं कुछ एक यूनिट ये मार्कर खरीदता हूँ. ये मार्कर खरीद के जो मुझे पैसे मिले, जो सेटिस्फैक्शन मिली पैसा देने के बाद, वो एग्जैक्टली उतना ही होना चाहिए जो पैसा लूज करने से मेरा सेटिस्फैक्शन लूज हुआ है. समझ रहे हो? मार्कर ले रहा हूँ, सेटिस्फैक्शन मिल रहा है, पैसा दे रहा हूँ, सेटिस्फैक्शन जा रहा है. तो जितना सेटिस्फैक्शन ये मार्कर मुझे पर रूपी दे रहा है, उतना ही सेटिस्फैक्शन अगर मेरा लूज हो रहा है पैसे देने पे, तब तो मैं इक्विलिब्रियम में हूँ. पैसा दे रहे हो तो सेटिस्फैक्शन लूज ही हो रहा है ना. ठीक है. All right, just let me know if it is audible to you at the back. ठीक है. Perfect. I hope now it is audible to you. Yeah. Online it is doing fine. Sandeep, goes good. Nahi? All right. So let's see this then. I was looking forward to the class. When I start my optionals and when I interact with you and then 10, 12 classes go on, after that, if a class doesn't happen, I start missing my optional batch. I start feeling, where are those people to whom I talk real economics? You know, so you know, I'm honestly telling you this, not for any other purpose, but honestly, like optional classes, I tend to miss because of that. All right. I hope you had a nice weekend, 2 days. I had a nice busy weekend. So let's get going then. So we will begin first with the questions I had given you last class. We'll cover upon them. So 2 questions, we'll cover them one by one. One question I had given you was on unitary elasticity of marginal utility. You know, that if for consumer equilibrium to hold, we need marginal utility to be unitary elastic with respect to price of the commodity. Now, I'm making you understand it first. All right. I'm making you, does somebody carry that question by any means? The question I had given you? Yeah, I'll just like to see the question, the language. So suppose I'm taking the second question first. So suppose if they ask us consumer equilibrium अब दिक्कत तो नहीं है ना कोई भी साउंड में हमारे ऑनलाइन इज ओके परफेक्ट. Consumer equilibrium in cardinal utility, consumer equilibrium in cardinal utility can take place, consumer equilibrium in cardinal utility can take place only if price elasticity of marginal utility of commodity is 1. 1 is unitary elastic. All right, that only if price elasticity of marginal utility of commodity is 1. Now see, Akanksha, if you could send me your query on the Telegram group, I will be able to help you on that. एक काम कर लो अविनाश, एक रिजवाना ने टाइप किया, उनको अभी भी ऑडिबल नहीं है, तो उनको बोल दो रिफ्रेश कर लेंगे तो ऑडिबल हो जाएगा. ऑल राइट, लेट्स सी दिस देन. व्हेन वी से कंज्यूमर इक्विलिब्रियम इन कार्डिनल यूटिलिटी, आप में से भी किसी को अगर बाई चांस मेरी आवाज ऑडिबल नहीं लग रही है तो आप खुद को रिफ्रेश कर लो वो ऑडिबल हो जाएगा. नाउ व्हेन वी से कंज्यूमर इक्विलिब्रियम, अंडरस्टैंड दिस. First of all, when we go back to the talk on equilibrium of consumer, so how does that equilibrium of consumer arise? It says MUX upon PX is equal to MUM. And we said this is something that we can also write as MUX upon MUM is equal to PX, whichever way you look at it. Ye bolo, ye bolo. Now, point is, we assume this to be constant. So remember, if this is constant, then any proportionate change in price has to be matched by an equal proportionate change in marginal utility in the same direction to make sure that equilibrium is maintained. Suppose करो अगर ये price बढ़ जाता है 10% से, so if the price rises by 10%, it will mean temporarily MUX by PX will become less than MUM. And now to go back to equilibrium, you need MUX to rise because we have assumed MUM to be a constant. To go back to equilibrium, you need MUX to rise because you have assumed MUM to be a constant. And by how much should MUX rise to cancel this? Same proportion. So imagine if MUX also rises by 10%, it implies percentage change in MUX is equal to percentage change in price. And when we take percentage change in marginal utility of X divided by percentage change in price of X, this is what we call elasticity of marginal utility of X with respect to its price of commodity. And now we know that if we want consumer equilibrium to be maintained, then we should have this equal to 1, that the percentage change in MUX should be equal to percentage change in price of X. This was the meaning of the question. Alright, this was the meaning of the question, that what was asked meant this, that show that for consumers equilibrium, you need unitary elasticity of MU at all points of time. That if your marginal utility is showing unitary elasticity, you are showing consumers equilibrium. How do we present it? How do we write it in the answer form? So I'm making you write that, you take it down, and then you will also learn how to create answers there. 150 words is what they had asked this. This is a past year paper question. 10 marks is what they had put for it. Now, you write in that, in case of cardinal utility theory, in case of cardinal utility theory, comma, there is equilibrium when utility derived by consumer from each unit of commodity after paying for it matches the utility derived from an extra unit of money. Utility derived from an extra unit of money. And then you should write this: MUX by PX is equal to MUM. All right. Then you write in the next line, according to assumption of cardinal utility theory, MUM is always a constant. MUM is always a constant. Full stop. This is because money is used as a measuring rod. Money is used as a measuring rod of utility. All right. Then in the same thing, you write, change the paragraph. Elasticity of marginal utility with respect to price is determined by ratio of proportionate change in marginal utility of commodity due to a given proportionate change in price of commodity. You know why we are doing this? Try understanding the intention. We know that the whole crux I have to explain is not more than 50 words. All right, the whole issue is about 50 words. Now, how to make sure that we reach 130, 140, 150 words without being repetitive and without writing nonsensical? So that is why I picked up this question. In such cases, what you need to do is focus on your explanation of each basic concept that you are going to use in your answer writing. All right, that is your way of creating words without being repetitive. That you are writing all basic concepts that you will use in the answer writing, and you are not repetitive, but you are writing all the parts that will be needed in it. And that's what we have done till now. So around 75 words we have used to cover this part up. All right. Then you change the paragraph and write, if price of a commodity becomes more, then it implies that marginal utility of money marginal utility of money becomes lesser as compared to make it becomes more as compared to. I said becomes lesser. Please change that. Becomes more as compared to ratio of marginal utility of commodity to its price. Full stop. In the same thing you write, therefore, MUX is what we call marginal utility of commodity. Therefore, MUX will become more, will have to become more rather. MUX will have to become more so that the ratio again becomes equal. Full stop. If price increases by X percent, then MUX will also have to increase by X percent. In a bracket you write because MUM remains constant. Close the bracket. This means that percentage change in MUX should always match percentage change in MUM. In PX. Bear with me. Percentage change in PX. Hence, it can be concluded that elasticity of marginal utility with respect to price is always equal to 1, for consumer's equilibrium to hold. Full stop. If elasticity is greater than 1, understand this intuition, you already do, but I just wanted to make it completely clear that if this elasticity is greater than 1, then it will mean if px rises by 10%, then mux will rise by more than 10%, and that will mean that will again not be equal to mum. You understand that? And similarly, if it is less than 1, mux will not rise sufficiently, again not equal to mum. So elasticity is greater than 1 and less than 1 will not bring you back to equilibrium. The point is that. So that's what we are just completing, that if elasticity is greater than 1, then the change in mux will be higher proportionately than change in price. And it will again create disequilibrium. Full stop. Same problem arises if elasticity is less than 1. Therefore, it is important for consumer equilibrium that the elasticity of mu of commodity always matches the value of 1, when it is with respect to price of commodity. I hope yes. Okay. So I'll answer this. That will give you the intuition also of the whole talk. So the question I am answering is that if we know that utility is not affected by price, then why all this is happening? So, go back to the first discussion also that we had on this, that utility is not affected by price, but choice will be. Because choice is a combination of utility, income, and price. Now, cardinal utility analysis did not consider income. Kind of Marshall assumed you always have the money to buy what you want. But they considered price and utility combination. So the idea is, if price becomes more, now I have to part with higher amount of utility when I pay money for the product. You see that? So my satisfaction derived per unit of the commodity after paying for it. If you try interpreting this ratio, if you recall the last class, I told you that this is satisfaction derived on the margin. On the margin means from extra unit, from a commodity per unit of money spent on it. This is what I told you in the last class also, so I'm not very keen on writing it clearly. I'm just pushing it for you. So think now, if this satisfaction derived on the margin from a commodity per unit of money spent on it is a function of both of these, and you are choosing this ratio to equate it to MUM to make a choice of what you will buy. So your utility is already determined with MUX. It is not that your utility is being determined by Px. Your utility is already determined by MUX. You already have given a table that, look, this is my MUX. So that table is already present in front of me. Now within that table, which point I will stabilize at will be determined with change in price and change in MU. You understand that? So my preferences are still independent of price, but then given that price will play a role in deciding how much satisfaction I am getting per unit of the rupee. So as price changes, my satisfaction per unit of rupee changes, and right hand side already tells me that this is the satisfaction I get from money, so that equilibrium will be disturbed. So the change in MU is because of that. Right, it will impact the amount I am buying. All right, so and that will be, again I repeat, that will be affected already by the given schedule of MU that I have. That okay, looking at the schedule, I will automatically know that if the price has risen from say 2 rupees to 4 rupees, then the consumer will demand this much less, given by the schedule. All right. Just one more thing is what I don't expect them to do, but who knows, and especially in economic services, they are doing all sorts of things at times. Remember, by chance, if you ever see a situation when you have no place where MUX by PX matches MUM, it's a possibility that you see no such place where this equality happens. Then you will choose the closest point above that place. For example, if my MUX by PX is greater than MUM on the third unit, and my MUX by PX is less than MUM on the fourth unit, then the consumer will stop at the third unit. You understand that? I will never go to the fourth unit. So sometimes they put you on these kind of predicament for 2 marks, 1 mark, one small tail will be put, that what if a consumer never gets MUX by PX equal to MUM? So if a consumer never gets MUX by PX equal to MUM, then the consumer will settle down with MUX by PX greater than MUM, the last unit where it happens. All right, wherever is the last unit where MUX by PX is greater than MUM, that is where the consumer will stop consuming. I can believe this can stay with you. I had few hands raised. Yes, yes. I'll come to you. Give me a second. Yes, yes. It's like this. If you have an MUX by PX equal to MUM, starting from here, if price of X rises, this will change to this, no? That is what you have written. All right, that if price of X becomes more, then the utility derived per rupee spent becomes lesser than MUM. All right. I had one, yes, yes. No words. But also they don't necessarily emphasize that if it is 150 words, it should be 150 words completely. The only idea is if it is 150 words, if it is 150 words, then they expect you to remain close to it. But if you are, say, drawing a graph and explaining everything, and that comes in 130 words, they don't penalize you for that. All right. So that is that. But for graphs, they don't attach any word. Actually, in 10 markers, they tell you it's 150 words. In 15 and 20 marks, they don't even tell you that how many words you have to write. So normally it is about whatever space they have given you. Now in this year's mains exam, what they had done, they had given a lot of space in paper 1. Around 4 pages for each sheet on 15 marker. So in many of the students didn't even fill that. So in that case also they were not penalized. It was not that they were penalized for doing it. All right, so that was. No. It's just a different thing. It's just you are drawing the diagram, that's it. Yes, yes. See, there is one thing. One is that in UPSC exam, suggestion is don't use calculus unless not asked, because many of your examiners don't know it too. No, honestly, I'm telling you, there are many universities where the professors are not well accustomed with calculus and things can go there. Secondly, in this case, using calculus will be a technical flaw because Marshall never used calculus for anything in cardinal utility. So it becomes a technical flaw to prove Marshallian things using calculus. So my suggestion will be in this case, stick to the normal idea. And even otherwise, using calculus, even if you feel like, just show it as a rough scope somewhere by the side, on the side of the paper and all, but never make it a part of your main answer unless specifically asked. I mean, if they specifically ask you, then of course you'll show it to them. All right, now see, there was a second question that I had asked you, and that was on Marshallian and Walrasian comparison of demand curve and supply curve being given. If denominator is increasing, then the numerator has to increase for the ratio to remain same. Rishi, क्या हुआ आज तुम्हें बताओ? अगर डिनोमिनेटर बढ़ेगा और न्यूमरेटर घट गया तो रेशियो तो और कम ही हो जाएगा ना. 7/2, and if you make 2 into 3 and make 7 into 5, life will become worse, no? Correct, Vikas? I will teach you Giffen goods and inferior goods. You please wait. When I teach you ordinal utility, we will be doing Giffen goods and inferior goods. MUM and PX, MUM remains a constant. There is no need to change MUM. All right, so just keep it in mind, Manjushri. MUM will remain a constant. When PX increases, MUM remains a constant. It's MUX which has to change. All right, and what I made you write about this becoming lesser is MUX by PX becoming lesser than MUM, not one of the two. Okay, now see, when you talk about Marshall and Walrus there, and some of your answers, I have sent you back the response. Some of it, I think 4 or 5 of you have not been able to unfortunately get my response. It was just because I was, believe me, having a terribly occupied weekend. And I was having no fun, at least no worldly fun. I was having fun with my economics, of course, but there was no worldly fun. So you bear with me on that. So in that case, if you haven't got a reply till today, you will be getting it by tonight, I'm sure. Because I saw good response from you. Almost 70 among you have sent me your answers, which was likable. But then I'm a human, so going through each of them, and I don't whisk through them. I read through them. What have you written? What is your language? How have you gone through? So it takes me some time, but I've gone through it. You're writing it okay. In these kind of questions, I'll teach you that just now. The only thing I get worried about is that some of you have overwritten the things. अपने भावनाओं को कंट्रोल जरूर करोगे. एग्जाम में ये कॉस्ट करता है नहीं तो. You can't write 300 words, 250 words for a 10 marker, no matter how much you would love doing that. Even I would love you doing that, but right now it's not allowed. So just right from the beginning, start controlling the whole idea that how do you write things when it is not asked in a particular manner. But good part was that those of you who attempted the question on Marshall and Walrus, almost all of you have understood the concept. The presentation was a problem here or there, but that's understandable. So we see this when we talk about, say if we take quantity, and if we take price, and if we take the supply curve, this was what I had asked you, and if we take the demand curve. All right, if we take quantity, we take price, and we take the supply curve, and we take the demand curve. Now, if you go like Marshall, and you choose a quantity which is to the left of equilibrium, if you go like Marshall, and you choose a quantity which is to the left of equilibrium, in that case, willingness to pay, willingness to sell can be this PS, and willingness to pay can be this PB. Price that the buyer wants to pay and price that the seller wants to receive. And now the seller wants to receive higher than what the buyer wants to pay, and that will discourage trading, and trade will start becoming lesser. It will discourage trading and trade will start falling. It will become lesser. Do I believe I'm reaching you on that? I repeat it once again. So I'm saying that if you have price, if you take the supply curve like this, so like at Q1, the supply curve tells us that the seller wants this much, and the demand curve tells us that the buyer is willing to pay this much. You understand that? So in that case, the buyer is willing to pay lesser than what the seller is wanting to receive. And that creates a situation where the seller will be unwilling to sell more and the market will start trading less. Now, when you draw your things in the examination also, your arrows sometimes become a very nice way of conveying your results to the examiner. क्योंकि देखो एक बात समझना, आप आपके एग्जामिनर को 19 क्वेश्चंस चेक करने हैं और वो जनरली स्पीकिंग जो मेरा एक्सपीरियंस रहा है, they don't give it more than 30-35 minutes. That is the maximum they will give it. So if you make their life easy and if you have drawn arrows like these, then looking at it, at least they are convinced that what you have drawn is fine. You understand that? And they would know that your concepts are clear. After that, if you have written peripherally correct things, then they are less aversive to giving you marks. They say, all right, I've seen the right thing and I've seen the approach, marks can be given on this. So that has to be the approach of your writing. Similarly, if you take a price to the right of equilibrium, say Q2, in that case, the willingness to pay is this, if we can call it A dash, while the willingness to sell is this, if we call it B dash. You know, willingness to pay is A dash and willingness to sell is B dash. Now, if willingness to pay is higher than willingness to sell, if willingness to pay is higher than willingness to sell, then that will mean that more trade will happen. All right, that will mean that more trade will happen. And if more trade takes place, you go further away from equilibrium. So you stay in equilibrium once. अगर आप किसी तरह से यहाँ पहुंच भी गए हो QE, लेकिन अगर एक बार आपको डिस्टर्ब कर दिया जाए इस तरफ या इस तरफ, तो आप लौट कर QE पे नहीं आओगे. If you somehow reach QE, say in the market, if by chance you are disturbed from QE and you go to the left of QE or to the right of QE, then you are never coming back to QE. And that is unstable equilibrium. That's the definition of unstable equilibrium. That if equilibrium is disturbed and if equilibrium can never be retrieved, then that gives us an example of unstable equilibrium. Do I believe we are clear on that? So we can claim that Marshall's equilibrium or Marshallian method is unstable. You know, Marshall's equilibrium or Marshallian method is unstable. That is the claim we can put. Marshall's equilibrium or Marshallian method is unstable. It's not stable here anymore. Now, on the other hand, if we look at Walras, so if we look at Walras and again take quantity, price, demand curve and supply curve, and again if we take a price above equilibrium, say P1, so if we take a price above equilibrium, P1, then in that case, this represents supply and this represents quantity demanded. I'm willing to sell S1 and I'm willing to buy D1. I'm willing to sell S1 and I'm willing to buy D1. Now that's a situation of excess demand. You see that? That's a situation of excess demand. And we know with the market equilibrium theory that if you have excess demand, then your price will start rising. अगर मार्केट में किसी को भी एक्सेस डिमांड दिखता है तो प्राइस बढ़ने लग जाएंगे. ऐसी बात तो थियोरेटिकली हम पढ़ ही चुके हैं. तो अगर आपका डिमांड है D1 और सप्लाई है S1, तो इसका मतलब अगर प्राइस इक्विलिब्रियम के ऊपर गया तो आपका एक्सेस डिमांड हो जाएगा, जिससे प्राइस और बढ़ने लग जाएगा. If the price is P1, demand is D1, supply is S1, that means excess demand, your quantity demanded is more than quantity supplied, and the price starts getting pushed up. Do I believe we are okay on that? And of course, the opposite happens if you take a price below equilibrium. If you take this price P2, Now quantity demanded is D2 and quantity supplied is S2. So if you take any price below equilibrium, then that creates excess supply. If you take any price below equilibrium, then that creates excess supply, and that will then mean that any price below equilibrium will push the price further downwards. Any price below equilibrium will push the price further downwards, and that will again take you away from equilibrium. So the conclusion is, if demand curve is upward sloping and supply curve is downward sloping, then both Marshall and Walras end up giving us unstable equilibrium. If demand curve is upward sloping and supply curve is downward sloping, then both Marshall and Walras end up giving us unstable equilibrium. Do I believe you are with me on this? Perfect. Now again, I'm just giving you one write-up so that you have an understanding of how to write it. And then I will discuss with you different cases of Marshall and Walras. There are several questions in my mind at the moment that I have to discuss with you from this topic. So I'm just going about it one by one. This has been quite their favorite hunting ground. Like there have been close to 4 questions that they have asked from topics surrounding this. All right, so we must be knowing each and every nitty-gritty of it per se. Let's see this then. You write below that. It is marginal, Nikita. You can write it as marginal. All right. Now you take this up. You write equilibrium is stable equilibrium is stable in the market. Equilibrium is stable in the market when after every disturbance it is again back to its original position. Full stop. If original position is not retrieved, then it is unstable equilibrium. Now after that, you can call this figure 1. You can draw this figure and then start writing. Alright, उसके बाद ये फिगर होना चाहिए. अगर आप ऑलरेडी ड्रॉ कर चुके हो तो बस इसका नाम फिगर 1 लिख दो और अपने आंसर में वहां पुट कर दो फिगर 1. Alright, if you have already drawn this figure, then just write figure 1, give it a name figure 1 and put it in your answer figure 1. That in your answer this figure should come now. Figure 1. And you can call this figure 2. Alright. So in that, so you should draw the figure and then below that you should write do I assume you have drawn it? Acha. Quickly draw it. Take a minute. Those who have not drawn it. Do I believe you have drawn the demand and supply curves by now? If you have, then I can start speaking, and when I take a pause, you can complete it. That is how good people work. All right, let's see this then. So I'm sure you have drawn the demand and supply curves by now. Labeling you can do. So you write in that if quantity traded is lesser than equilibrium quantity, then willingness to charge represented by point A and underline that, represented by point A. This way, what you do is you force the examiner to see the figure you have drawn. All right, that what I have drawn, please see it. Sometimes what happens is they are too much in a hurry, and you might have drawn the figure, they might miss it. They may feel that, oh, the figure was not there, and then you lose marks unnecessarily. So in your answer, you must incorporate reference to the figure, point A. Then the fellow will read point A and search for point A कि है point A है कहाँ, किसको बता रहे हैं, तो अपने आप ही वो फिगर ढूंढेंगे आपका. ये गलती नहीं तो होती है कभी कभी. और एक काम तो कभी मत किया करना, कोशिश करना कि ना हो, about drawing the figure at the end of the page or in the beginning of the page. Try drawing it at the side of the page and keep writing by the side of the figure. All right, these are just suggestions I'm giving you. Rest, you guys are adult and we are a democracy till now. So, so I am not necessarily forcing you, but I'm just telling you the methods you should use. So ideally what you should do is take the left-hand side of the page, draw your diagram, and with the diagram, start explaining on its side. So in that case, in any case, there is no chance that the examiner will miss that you have drawn. Otherwise, I don't want to risk it. Sometimes people draw it at the end of the page or in the beginning of the next page, and by then the examiner has lost patience. One more thing, in the previous question that you solved, there is no possibility of a figure. Please don't experiment. All right, I am an economist, I will draw something out of it. Don't do that, it's not required. All right, those questions are theoretical in nature, we will solve them theoretically. So be very careful, some questions the figure is not needed, we won't push it hard over there. All right, so I'm assuming that within all these talks, those of you who had not drawn the diagram must have completed it. So you must say thank you to me. So, okay, let's see this. You write it up, then you write by point A, which is higher than consumers' willingness to pay, comma, represented by point B, full stop. Quantity traded in the market. Well, I didn't say this, but I'm assuming that with the training I tried giving you, after writing represented by point B, you would have underlined that. All right, perfect. Can't tell you how much extra weight gain I just had by you telling me that you have done it. All right, so you write within that, next then, you write quantity traded in the market starts falling. Quantity traded in the market starts falling and shifts away from equilibrium. shifts away from equilibrium. Change the paragraph and write, similarly, if quantity traded in the market is higher than equilibrium, then willingness to pay represented by A dash is higher than willingness to sell comma represented by B dash, full stop, represented by B dash. So the willingness to sell is B dash, willingness to pay is A dash. And in the same thing you write, therefore, quantity traded will start rising and market shifts away from equilibrium. This shows that Marshallian equilibrium is unstable. Marshallian equilibrium is unstable in this case. Marshallian equilibrium is unstable in this case. You change the paragraph and write, and when you write Marshallian equilibrium is unstable, underline that. Again, your conclusion should be underlined. What that does is, again, it solves the problem for your examiner. They keep seeing the main point, keep seeing the underlined things, and they quickly get over with what you have written. All right, so in that case, sometimes we are rewarded better by them. You change the paragraph and write, Walrasian equilibrium is also unstable in this case. And then you should be drawing figure 2. After having written that, you should be drawing figure 2. ये लिखने के बाद आप वो figure draw करोगे. All right, जो एक बार लिख दिए फिर ये figure draw करोगे. And then you will again explain the figure. You write below that, no problem. You can use pen in drawing. That's not a problem. But just be careful. You don't need to scratch things. Because if you are using pen, you don't have a choice to change it, or you will have to use a whitener, etc. So in the exam, it may not look very tidy. So just practice yourself well, which you would have. So by the time you go to the exam, you would have practiced this at least maybe 30, 35 times. By this, I don't mean only this part, but the whole theory. I mean, this part kind of a theory. So you would know how things have to be drawn. Normally, but still, if you are susceptible, if you have a drawing like mine, I would have used a pencil. Because I was never very confident about what I am drawing. So I would always use a pencil so that I have a chance of changing the thing if the need arises. All right, but in case you are confident and you feel I can do it, not a problem, then go ahead, use a pen. There is no hard and fast rule. Like they are not looking for a pencil. My moral of the story was that. All right, then you take this up. After figure 2, you write if equilibrium price, if market price, if market price is higher than equilibrium, if market price is higher than equilibrium, then quantity supplied S1 is lesser than quantity supplied S1 is lesser than quantity demanded D1. Quantity demanded D1, which means that the market has excess demand. Market has excess demand. Full stop. Price starts rising. Price starts rising and moving further away from equilibrium. Price starts rising and moving further away from equilibrium. Full stop. Similarly, you can change the paragraph. Similarly, if price is below equilibrium, and in the exam, if you are in a hurry, you can use your symbols. Like you can write, this is our equilibrium price, this is point E. You can always write P1 greater than PE, P2 less than PE. That's completely okay, saves your time and you can be quicker. अभी तो आसान जिंदगी है ना, क्लास में है, अच्छी दुनिया चल रही है, छठ पूजा हो रहा है, तो सब कुछ ठीक चल रहा है. But exam hall, life won't be like that. You will be in a hurry, you will be quickly going ahead. So in that case, using this won't get you penalized. It's completely okay. There is no a problem on that. So you write in that, if price is below the equilibrium, then there is excess supply. There is excess supply as S2 is greater than D2. S2 is greater than D2. Full stop. Therefore, the price falls. And market shifts away from equilibrium. Market shifts away from equilibrium. This means, change the paragraph and then write this. This means that with downward sloping supply curve, that with downward sloping supply curve and upward sloping demand curve, both the markets show unstable equilibrium. Show unstable equilibrium. All right. Now see, then I take you to a third possibility. So if you recall, we have done two possibilities till now: normal demand and supply curve, and Walrus and Marshall both. I'll just take 1 second. So case one was normal demand and supply curve, and both Marshall and Walrus were stable. Then we did another case right now: demand curve downward, upward sloping, supply curve downward sloping, both unstable. I'm just introducing a case 3 to you. That is when both demand and supply curves are downward sloping. Both demand and supply curves are downward sloping. Now, both the curves are downward sloping. Yes, you had a question. So finally it will end at 0. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now, when we have it like this, there is a case A in this. Is case 3 में एक part A होगा. Demand curve is more elastic, say flatter, than supply curve. Demand curve is more elastic, or it is flatter than supply curve. So we have decided both the curves are downward sloping, but now the demand curve is flatter than the supply curve. That is, demand is more elastic, supply is relatively inelastic. That is the situation we are developing here. So if you look at it, if we take quantity and we take price, and if suppose I draw demand curve which is flatter and supply curve which is steeper. All right, I draw demand curve which is flatter and supply curve which is steeper. Now again we will do the same analysis. We will use Marshall and we will use Walrus, and we will see how that works out. So if you use Marshall, say if I begin with that, if I use Marshall, then according to Marshall, this is the willingness to pay, the price that the seller wants to charge. I hope you are clearly seeing that. Supply curve at say this level of quantity. If I take a quantity Q1, then according to Marshall, this will be the price seller is willing to charge. While this will be a price that buyer is willing to pay. एक बात मैं बीच में रुक के बता रहा हूं, अगर किसी के मन में आ रहा है ऐसा क्यों होगा, वो जाने दो, होगा. ठीक है, मतलब उस दिशा में तुम्हें जाना ही नहीं है. That why will this happen? There are multiple types of markets. Any market, anything can happen. You can have a decreasing cost industry, so supply curve can be downward sloping, and you can have a Veblen good or a Giffen good, so demand curve can be upward sloping. You can have a normal good, so demand curve can be downward sloping. So don't go into that conjecture, क्योंकि मैं फिर पढ़ा रहा हूँगा कुछ और तुम्हारा मन कुछ और ही सोच रहा होगा. कौन से रियल वर्ल्ड में ये होता है, माइक्रो रियल वर्ल्ड में बहुत कम होता है, इसीलिए उसे माइक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स कहते हैं. वो इंडिविजुअल्स पे बेस्ड है. You understand that? So that's about individual analysis. So real world example of a microeconomic theory, you will find it very difficult to exemplify, because micro is about individuals. Now something happened with you that can't be a real world story. You understand that? So these are all cases we are covering for all possibilities that might arise. I just stopped and told you because this can be a normal question in the mind. Why will this happen? Why should the supply curve be downward sloping? None of your business on that. You know, I'm just saying that theoretically it is possible for the supply curve to be downward sloping. That is if you have a decreasing cost industry. So if I have it and I'll draw it for you. अभी थोड़े आगे बढ़ेंगे तो मैं तुम्हें वो ड्रॉ करके भी दिखाऊंगा कि कैसे डिक्रीजिंग कॉस्ट इंडस्ट्री में सप्लाई कर्व डाउनवर्ड स्लोपिंग हो जाता है. सो जस्ट डोंट बॉदर अबाउट इट फॉर द टाइम बीइंग. कमिंग बैक टू माय टॉक टू यू. सो नाउ थिंक द प्राइस दैट द बायर इज विलिंग टू पे इज लेसर, price that the seller is willing to receive is higher. Obviously it will result in less trade. The market goes away from equilibrium. And similarly, if you take the right side of equilibrium, then the price that the buyer wants to pay is P dash B, seller wants to receive is P dash S, and that will mean you will start having increase in trade, isn't it? So think, in case of Marshall, if you see the diagram, if your equilibrium is to the left of equilibrium quantity, don't forget that this is equilibrium quantity. एक और बात मैं बता देता हूँ, मेरे आईज में पैरालैक्स एरर है, तो इसके वजह से मेरे ये लाइंस हर बार स्ट्रेट हों जरूरी नहीं. मुझे देखकर तुम अपने लाइन ऐसे बनाना मत शुरू कर देना. Alright, I have a parallax error due to which when I see things horizontally here, they look straight to me but they can be slanted. Alright, तो ये भी वार्निंग दे देता हूँ. पता चला अच्छा सर बना रहा था क्लास में ऐसा इक्विलिब्रियम और लाइन जाती थी ऐसे. नहीं, वो मेरे एरर्स हैं, आप उसको अवॉइड करोगे. कॉपी पे मैं भी ऐसी हरकत नहीं करता हूँ. Alright, it's only on the board that at times, that also may not happen every time, but at times it's possible I might end up doing that. So you don't start copying it ipso facto. यू नो, पता चला नहीं मैं तो पूरा सर का चेला हूं, वही करूंगा जो सर ने किया. यू नो, तो वो मत करना, बस उसमें गड़बड़ हो जाएगी. ऑल राइट, so coming back to my point now, Marshall's equilibrium looks unstable because we see that if equilibrium quantity is say Q1, then that Q1 is to the left of QE and their price that the seller wants to charge is higher than the price that the buyer wants to pay. And the quantity traded will fall. So in a relatively shortcut way, what we are saying is, to the left of QE, Q1 less than QE, willingness to charge by seller is greater than willingness to pay by buyer. Therefore, trade falls. I hope it can make sense to you. Willingness to charge by the seller is greater than willingness to pay by the buyer, and therefore trade falls. And similarly, we can say to the right of QE, that is Q2 greater than QE, willingness to charge by seller is lesser than willingness to pay by buyer, and therefore trade rises. So we can claim, using these two, we can claim Marshall's equilibrium is unstable. I hope it makes sense to you. Alright, Marshall's equilibrium is unstable. Abhay, actually all equilibriums in real life scenario are unstable, to be honest. You disturb the equilibrium, very rarely they come back. Yes, you can say that, Rizwana. So I can believe we understand this aspect, that whenever you are to the left of equilibrium quantity, that means quantity traded will fall. And it's always advisable, try drawing these in case of Marshall. And in case of Walrus, it should be on the price line. All right, so in that case, the examiner will get it very quickly as to what you intend. All right, that is the aspect. Okay. Then, if we move into the talk by Walrus, that what did Walrus have to say on this? See, if we take again a flatter demand curve and a steeper supply curve, and both are downward sloping, in case of Walrus, if you choose a price above equilibrium, in case of Walrus, if you choose a price above equilibrium, you will see that it still creates, it still creates excess supply. Just to draw it fair, if I take quantity and if I take price and if I take a steeper supply curve and a flatter demand curve, choose a price above equilibrium, P1, your demand is D1, supply is S1, price will fall till you reach PE. All right? I want you to draw your own and check it. एग्जाम हॉल में मुझे अलाउ नहीं करते अनफॉर्चुनेटली तो तुम ड्रॉ करो और देखो कि जो मैंने ड्रॉ किया बात मैं ठीक कर रहा हूं या नहीं. आप मुझे चेक कर लो कि सब बात ठीक है या नहीं. Alright, so in that case it will give you a confidence that okay, I understand it now. So demand is to the left, supply is to the right in case of a price above equilibrium. So quantity demanded is lesser than quantity supplied, creating an excess supply. And if there is excess supply, the price will fall. Creating an excess supply, and if there is an excess supply, the price will fall. So we can claim here at P1 greater than PE, that is when price is above equilibrium, there is excess supply, and excess supply because S1 is greater than D1. Therefore, price falls till equilibrium is attained. At P1 greater than PE, there is excess supply because S1 is greater than D1, and the price falls till equilibrium is attained. This is case A, Walrasian analysis. This is still case A. I'll just take a second. This is still case A because your demand curve is still flatter than supply curve. But now we are looking at it from Walrus's point of view. All right. So just to clarify, this is Marshall and this is Walrus. Yes. We are moving away from equilibrium. Absolutely. So it depends on which factor do you choose for equilibrium determination. If you choose quantity for equilibrium determination, then you will get instability. If you choose price for equilibrium determination, you get stability. This discussion, I'll do few more discussions with you, but these are the discussions that answer a question that one of the past year paper asks, that is equilibrium in one market necessarily a representation of equilibrium in the other market? अगर एक मार्केट में इक्विलिब्रियम है तो क्या ये जरूरी है कि दूसरे में इक्विलिब्रियम होगा? और वो कहते हैं आप डिस्कस करो. They say that you discuss this, that if you have equilibrium in one market, then you will have equilibrium, stable equilibrium in one market, then you will have stability in the other market. And we will say it is not necessary. It's possible, but it is not necessary. So if demand curve is downward sloping, supply curve is upward sloping, possible. But if you have this kind of a situation, now you see Walrus looks stable, isn't it? Because now even if you go below equilibrium price, say like this, a P2, quantity supplied is S2, quantity demanded is D2, we have excess demand. I hope it works for all of us. And therefore, price will start increasing, isn't it? If we go, I'm saying that if I take a price P2 lesser than PE, then there is excess demand because D2 is greater than S2. Therefore, price rises till equilibrium is attained. All right? Therefore, price rises till equilibrium is attained. That is the way to go. All right? That you have to analyze it in that manner. That if there is P1 greater than PE, then I have excess supply and you have price falling. If I have a P2 less than PE, there is excess demand and I have price rising. So we create a situation where Walrus gives us a stable equilibrium. With all that, I can conclude that Walrus's equilibrium is stable. Walrus's equilibrium is stable while Marshall's equilibrium was unstable. Do I believe? Yes, yes. Market equilibrium, that is, yeah. Okay, I'll tell you how can they do that. Think of it this way. How about Pepsi and Coke starting to compete in price and sending their price downwards? What will they do to each other? Kill each other. It will all end when they are charging a marginal cost with no profit. But what happens when they compete in quantity? More dealership, more advertisement, expansion. So imagine if they compete in price, they destroy each other. They compete in quantity, both are thriving. So the way you look at the market will decide whether what kind of result you get. Well, it will depend on how the market is choosing. There are different markets in this economy. Okay, think like this. Suppose when you are going to a market for a commodity, sometimes its price can be a very important factor for you, and sometimes the availability of quantity can be a very important factor for you. And that is why both Marshall and Walrus are relevant. That Marshall was looking at it from the point of view is how will you trade, what is your willingness to pay for the commodity. And Walrus was looking at it as to how much is the excess demand or excess supply for the commodity. So if you change the way you look at the market, your results will also start becoming different. All right. No. They are both talking about necessities, luxuries, everything. But Marshall is only saying that we are majorly bothered about quantity traded being a determining factor in your equilibrium. And what is the willingness to pay and willingness to sell of the buyers and sellers. All right. Willingness to pay, willingness to sell, I'll tell you means what. Think like this. Marshall was deriving his equilibrium with a consumer utility theory behind him. So for him, demand curve represented the marginal utility curve. You understand that? For him, demand curve was represented by willingness to pay. And supply curve for him was a representation of marginal cost curve. That minimum willingness to sell. Walrus came later with a general equilibrium theory behind him. So for him, demand curve represented willingness to pay, but effectively it was about how much is one person going to pay in the market compared to what the other person pays, and does that create excess demand or an excess supply. So Walrus was looking at the market this way, thinking that, okay, if the market has excess supply, then the price will fall because the number of buyers is lesser than number of sellers. Marshall was saying, if preferences are more than the availability of the commodity, then it will increase demand for that commodity and trade will be more. The approach here. You see that? So Marshall was looking at the market from the point of view of how people value the commodity, while Walrus was looking at from the point of view of how is the availability there of the commodity. So their views were different, and therefore, and again I repeat, it's a little early in microeconomics to tell you Walrus. But some of you have done general equilibrium theory. So Walras was talking in general equilibrium terms. For him, this was a partial equilibrium derived from general equilibrium. Marshall never had a general equilibrium in his mind. For those of you who have not done general equilibrium, don't bother. I will be doing it with you in the class itself. But for Walras, it was about shortage or surplus. If there is a shortage, then price will rise. If there is a surplus, price will fall. For Marshall, it was not about shortage or surplus. For Marshall, it was about how the consumer values the commodity. And if the consumer values the commodity more and the producer values it less, willingness to sell kya hai? The valuation attached by seller. Willingness to pay kya hai? Valuation attached by buyer. If the buyer values something more and seller values something less, you understand that? Then in that case, the seller will be definitely willing to sell the commodity and the buyer will be definitely willing to buy it and trade will rise. अच्छा, ये कोविड पैंडेमिक के बाद इतनी पिक्चरें फ्लॉप हो रही हैं. अभी भी 2 पिक्चर आई बड़े बड़े स्टार्स की, वो चली नहीं. तो क्यों नहीं चल रहे हैं? क्योंकि कोविड पैंडेमिक ने बायर्स को बताया, जो मूवी गोअर्स थे, कि तुम घर बैठकर ओटीटी में 2 महीने में वो पिक्चर देख लोगे और एट टाइम्स एड फ्री. तो तुम पूरी फैमिली लेके जाके 4,000 रुपए क्यों दोगे फॉर अ मूवी विच इज नॉट अबव एवरेज? This, see, I'll tell you what, it is about preference being created in the buyer's mind and the sellers have not yet adjusted to it. The day sellers start adjusting to it, things will change in the market again. But sellers are behind the curve right now. For the sellers, they are still in the pre-COVID period. That you produce any commodity, just get good stars into it, and people will throng to the life because for them, movie going was an experience apart from just movie watching. That scenario was changed by COVID pandemic. Look at this classroom here. There wouldn't have been a hybrid class if there was no COVID pandemic. There would be offline sessions going on. So people realized, look, at least I did, that there is a possibility that both set of people can be taught through this methodology, and some of you can prefer online. Prefer is the word I'm using. So be conscious of that. Some of you can prefer online for various reasons of yours. Some of you can be office going, as some of you are. I talk to you, many of you. So some of you are office going, so you prefer that. Some of you at times can have other things, college going and all. So due to that, you may prefer online. Some of you prefer offline because you believe, no, in online I may not concentrate as much, or I may not get that much of a representation as what I get offline. Now these are preferences, mind you. And that is where the buyers and the sellers have to interact and adjust to that factor. पर सोचो अगर कोई इंस्टीट्यूशन हो जो इस बात को इग्नोर कर दे या उनके समझ ही ना आए कि ऐसा हो सकता है. Let's leave the word ignore, but let's say if they don't understand, then the Marshallian thing comes in that buyers may be willing to pay something, sellers may be willing to receive and so on, and one of them is not getting it. If both of them get it, then you get an equilibrium, towards equilibrium movement. That is the point I'm telling you. Why do you see so many apps being developed? And do all apps succeed? The answer is no. So which apps succeed? Which can predict better what is the need of the people? And then people start using them more. There are thousands of apps created. Some of them don't succeed because they can't predict. I'm not even going into the technicality of it, that the technical difficulty of using it and so on and so forth. I'm just talking about the success or the failure of an idea. That whether this idea will work or not. So Marshall was looking at the market in this manner. Marshall के लिए ये बात थी, buyer कितना value करते हैं, seller कितना value करते हैं. अगर buyer commodity को ज़्यादा value करते हैं seller से, तो buyer ज़्यादा पैसा देने को तैयार हैं, और seller कम पैसे मांग रहे हैं, तो दोनों खुश होंगे trade करके. You understand that? Buyer is willing to pay more and seller is demanding less. Now if the buyer is willing to pay 10 rupees and seller is demanding 5 rupees, then buyer will be happily buying more and seller will be happily selling more because both of them know that they are gaining from the transaction. But the same thing is not true, and please understand that, the same thing is not true when it comes to Walras. Walras looked at the market from a surplus shortage point of view. For him, it was not whether the buyer was valuing it more or the seller was valuing it less. So for Walras, the situation was, if the market has a surplus, the price will fall. And if the market has a shortage, the price will rise. किसी को याद है वॉलरस ने जनरल इक्विलिब्रियम में क्या थ्योरी यूज की थी, क्या बोलते थे? वेरियन में एक वर्ड यूज है, पर्सन ए एंड पर्सन बी विल बी ऑफर्ड अ प्राइस बाय, अच्छा मैं यूज कर लेता हूं, टाइम बचा लेते हैं, ऑक्शनियर। तो वॉलरस के लिए ऑक्शन हो रहा था, बोली लग रही है, नीलामी लग रही है, इतने का बिकेगा, इतने का बिकेगा, इतने का बिकेगा। उस पर लोग आके बोल रहे हैं हाँ जी मैं इतना खरीदूंगा, दूसरा कह रहा है मैं इतना बेचूंगा। अगर एक्सेस सप्लाई है तो नीलामी में बोली कम हो जाएगी। यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? इट्स एन ऑक्शनिंग मार्केट गोइंग ऑन. Somebody is auctioning. Somebody is getting up and saying, okay, for 30 rupees, how much are you willing to pay, willing to purchase? Buyers say, I'm willing to purchase D1. Sellers say, oh, I'm willing to sell S1. Oh, that means excess supply. Fair enough. Then at 25 rupees, how much are you willing to purchase? Because looking at excess supply, they see that now the price should go down. The auctioneer brings up a new price. Okay, at 25 rupees, how much are you willing to purchase? Again, the buyer says some amount, seller says the amount. If it is still above equilibrium, again they will come up at 20 rupees, how much are you willing to purchase? Until they become equal, the auctioning goes on. That was Walrus's thinking. Do I believe I reach you on that? All right, since you asked, I mean, generally UPSC will never push you that side, but since there was a doubt I saw in your mind that how come this is happening, but this is how they decided the price about. All right, that one person was thinking behavior, another person was thinking auction, and then they reached their own solutions. And that is why you see opposite things happening at times. Yes, yes. Yes, but that is the whole idea, that willingness to pay is reflected once the market shows a shortage or a surplus. But in case of Marshall, that willingness to pay itself becomes a factor determining trade. All right. Okay, now, yes. See, market is a single one. How you determine equilibrium depends on what happens. You understand that? ये अप्रोच है या ये अप्रोच है, ये दोनों सेम ही मार्केट है. अब जो भी अप्रोच से यूज करो तुम उसमें, ठीक है. नेट का प्रॉब्लम है, माया जाल है ये तो फिर. ठीक है. All right. So doesn't matter what we can do in the meantime. I'm sure in that time we can retrieve internet. Today since morning it's kind of affecting me. In my morning class also, or GS class, I had to leave it 15 minutes early. There was some issue related to technique. We are back. अच्छा, कभी कभी बकबक करने में टाइम निकल जाता है. ठीक है. Yes, yes. No. The preferences are driven by buyers or of the buyers, and the cost of production is what the suppliers see. And the choice is a mixture of both. All right. Remember, production and consumption together decide equilibrium. As Marshall would famously say, demand and supply are two sides of the scissor, and they decide the things, isn't it? All right. Then you take this up. We can take, so this case is clear. We can take case B, in case 3 only, part B. We can take part B in this itself. Part B is, and if you want, you can start drawing it. Same thing, when demand and supply curves are downward sloping and demand curve is less elastic, that is, demand curve is steeper than supply curve. When both demand and supply curves are downward sloping and demand curve is now steeper than supply curve. All right. जब तुम लोग कॉन्फिडेंटली गलती करते हो ना, मुझे इंटरनली मजा आता है. All right. So when demand curve and supply curves are downward sloping, now demand is less elastic. अब demand curve steeper होगा और supply curve flatter. All right. So if we see how the Marshall's theory would have gone about, again we take quantity, we take price. Now the demand curve is steeper and supply curve is flatter. In the previous case, we were drawing demand curve flatter and supply curve steeper. Now in this case, remember, if you take a quantity to the left of equilibrium, then in that case, the price that the buyers are willing to pay is higher than the price that the sellers are willing to receive, and therefore quantity traded will rise. All right? So at Q1 less than QE, price paid by buyer or willingness to pay of buyer is greater than willingness to pay by seller. Therefore, quantity traded will rise till it reaches equilibrium. All right, at Q1 less than QE, price paid by buyer is greater than price paid by seller. Therefore, quantity traded will rise till it reaches equilibrium. I'm taking my liberty now, assuming that you have seen the cases. So even if I'm writing all this, the clarity is there for concept part. ये लिबर्टी ले सकता हूं मैं, क्योंकि अब आप 2-3 केस देख चुके हो, तो अब आपको पता तो है ही हो क्या रहा है. तो मैं सारी चीजें डिटेल में नहीं लिख रहा. I'm just putting it in front of you. All right. So now we see that if quantity traded is less than QE, then we have a situation where price paid by buyer or willingness to pay of the buyer is higher than willingness to charge of the seller. PB is the willingness to pay of the buyer. PS is the willingness to charge of the seller. All right. And that's why trade will rise. If you take it to the right of QE, say a Q2, then willingness to charge will be P dash S and willingness to pay will be P dash B. So now the willingness to pay becomes less than willingness to charge, and quantity traded will become less. So we can say at Q2 greater than QE, PB is less than PS. Therefore, quantity traded will fall till it reaches equilibrium. At Q2 greater than QE, PS, this is PB dash, lesser than PS dash. I hope it's visible to all of us. PB dash is lesser than PS dash. So at this kind of in this kind of a situation, we have PB dash lesser than PS dash, which will mean willingness to pay is lesser than willingness to charge. So the quantity traded will fall till it reaches equilibrium. I hope it makes sense to us. Well, fair enough. This is Marshall stable. So we can say, therefore, Marshall's equilibrium is stable. Therefore, Marshall's equilibrium is stable. ये stable होगा. अब यहाँ walrus unstable होगा. You try drawing on walrus and see, you will get walrus unstable in this case. I will draw it for you and then you can match it. See, if we take quantity and if we take price, and again if we take a steeper, now we say demand curve is steeper and supply curve is flatter. So if you see, if you charge a price above equilibrium, quantity supplied is lesser than quantity demanded, price will start rising. All right, just pick a price above equilibrium. So we say that at P1, which is greater than PE, at P1 greater than PE, S1 is less than D1, that is excess demand, therefore price rises and market shifts away from equilibrium. At P1 greater than PE, price will rise and the market shifts away from equilibrium. So if the price is above equilibrium, if a price is above equilibrium, then Walrus shows further increase in price. If the price is above equilibrium, then Walrus shows further increase in price. On the other hand, if I take a price below equilibrium, we will see demand less and supply more. So we say that, let's call it D2 and S2. So we say that at P2 less than PE, D2 is less than S2, that is excess supply. So price falls and shifts away from equilibrium. Price falls and shifts away from equilibrium. So that's the next result that you see, that price falls and shifts away from equilibrium. So what does it tell us? That Walrus gives us an unstable equilibrium. अब सोचो अगर मैं तुम्हें क्वेश्चन पूछूं और वहां बोलूं that stability in Marshallian equilibrium implies stability in Walrasian equilibrium, discuss. So you will discuss it saying that it doesn't imply, because it is not necessarily happening everywhere. It is possible for Marshall to be stable and Walrus to be unstable, and it is possible for Walrus to be stable and Marshall to be unstable. Yes, in one case, when both the curves, when demand curve is downward sloping and supply curve is upward sloping, then we see equilibrium as stable for both. But that is not always happening, and therefore we can't claim one to imply the other. All right, but this was a question that they asked for 10 marks in UPSC again. All right, this was a 10 marker. So again, what they were expecting you to do is draw one of these cases, show that stability is not implied, explain that case, and draw the case of stability and say that it can happen in some cases, and therefore it cannot be concluded that one equilibrium implies stability of another. All right, that is the way they try testing you. They try thinking whether you have understood the thing or not. I can believe you. Yes, yes. No, don't go that side. It will take us into the algebra of it. I don't want to take you that side. All right, there is your question is not incorrect, but from UPSC's point of view, let's not go that side. All right, that is the only reason. Yes, yes. No, but why should that change? Excess supply is supply more than demand. Fair enough, but imagine, just look at the graph. Even now, if you have excess supply, anything in excess supply, the graph can be anything, but anything in excess supply, the price will fall. You understand that? Why will the market be willing to pay more for something which is already high in supply? You see that? So that is the idea here. No. There's no assumption. Walrus did not assume all that. Walrus, as I told you, Walrus was coming from the auctioning system. So we got a result from auctioning system. It's the way you come over and you give similar results. All right. Okay. Then let's see this. So Himanshu, why don't you try doing that? Himanshu asked me that, sir, can you please summarize all cases in a tabular form Marshall versus Walrus. But I suggest, why don't you do that? If you do that, you will be more confident by the end of that whole story. You know, Palak, the equilibrium is stable if it comes back. I hope you have seen the last class. If you have not, please see the last class. Equilibrium is stable when you are saying that the market comes back to the equilibrium from where it had been disturbed. And equilibrium is unstable if it doesn't come back to the point where it had started. So see, wherever I am talking stable, the market is coming back to PE and QE. And wherever I'm saying unstable, the market is not coming back to initial PE and QE. Perfect, Anusha. I hope we are clear on this then, and you have taken it down. Okay, let's go to the last case of this, case 4. एरो क्लियर नहीं हो रहा है, कौन सा, ये वाला या वो वाला? जिधर तुम्हारे प्राइस, अब जैसे ये एग्जांपल लो, यहां पे प्राइस ऑफ द बायर बड़ा है प्राइस ऑफ द सेलर से, तो विलिंगनेस टू पे मोर है ना, तो ट्रेड बढ़ेगा या घटेगा? बढ़ता है एक्स एक्सेस पे कैसे है, राइट जाने पे या लेफ्ट जाने पे? तो देखो राइट जा रहा है, ठीक है। और जहां भी कहते हो ट्रेड घटेगा तो वहां लेफ्ट आ रहा है ना। ऐसे ही वाई एक्सेस पे जब कहते हो बढ़ेगा तो ऊपर जा रहा है, और कहते हो घटेगा तो नीचे आ रहा है, ठीक है ना। ऑल राइट, लेट्स सी दिस। यस यस, is the market for? You mean this? You can mark it on y-axis, not a problem. You can mark it on y-axis. All right. Now you write case 4. Case 4, when both demand and supply curves are upward sloping. When both demand and supply curves are upward sloping. And again in case 4, you can take part A, supply flatter than demand. So we begin with case 4. When both demand and supply curves are upward sloping, and within that you take part A, supply flatter than demand. Both demand and supply curve upward sloping and supply flatter than demand. You try this, then I'll try it after a minute. फिर आप लोग चेक करके बता देना कि मैंने ठीक किया या गलत किया. They will coincide then, Surbi, if they are similar slope, if both are upward sloping and same elasticity, they will start coinciding or becoming parallel to each other. You can show the arrow on curves also, Vigneshwaran, not a problem. Okay, OPEC is doing that. Fair enough, Akshay. Both are upward sloping. Remember that. All right, I'm assuming that you would have done some part of the work by now. So you can always test me on whether we are going right or wrong. So if we take quantity, price, and we take Marshall first, so supply curve, and we have said demand curve is, or let's take this as demand curve, and we have said supply curve is flatter than the demand curve. If we take, so this is the equilibrium quantity, QE. If we take a quantity to the left of QE, let us say Q1, then quantity demanded is this, quantity supplied is this, PS, quantity demanded is this, PB, right? Quantity supplied is the upper one, so I mean price of the supplier. So the willingness to charge of the seller is higher than willingness to pay of the buyer. The willingness to charge of the seller is higher than willingness to pay of the buyer. And that will mean the quantity traded in the market will become lesser. All right. So we say that at Q1 lesser than QE, PS is willingness to charge, is greater than PB, willingness to pay. And therefore, quantity traded falls and moves away from equilibrium. I hope you are with me on this. No problem on that? So remember, if we take Marshall's way at Q1 lesser than QE, we have willingness to charge higher than willingness to pay, and so quantity traded becomes lesser. On the other hand, at any other equilibrium other side, let's say Q2, willingness to pay is P dash B, willingness to sell is P dash S, quantity traded will become higher. So we can say that at Q2 greater than QE, PS is less than PB, therefore quantity traded rises and moves away from equilibrium. Quantity traded rises and moves away from equilibrium. So one can conclude easily that Marshall is giving an unstable solution here. All right, Marshallian equilibrium will be unstable. Everyone with me on this? All right, this is one example then. If we same thing we do with respect to walrus, if we take quantity, we take price, and we use walrus, and we take, say, a demand curve which is steeper and a supply curve which is flatter. Now again, if you take an equilibrium, a price above equilibrium, quantity demanded is lesser than quantity supplied, so you have excess supply. So at a price above equilibrium, there is excess supply, so price will start falling, isn't it? Excess supply ka matlab price girega. So we say that at P1 greater than PE, D1 is less than S1, that is excess supply, therefore price falls till equilibrium is attained. Price falls and the arrows will go this side. Price falls till equilibrium is attained. All right, this is in case of walrus. And we can make it the other way around also. We can always say that any price, say if we take a price P2 lesser than PE, then this is D2 and this is S2. I'm deliberately doing it like this. I want you actually to invest yourself more in this. You know, जब तुम खुद से करोगे ना, confident हो जाओगे, फिर एग्जाम में मेरी याद भी नहीं आएगी, तो अच्छी बात है. Then that is what I want you to reach. That in such cases you are confident, okay, this is how it goes. So we know that at P2 less than PE, D2 is greater than S2, that is excess demand. Therefore, price rises till equilibrium is attained, till equilibrium is attained at say E. We can call this E. Correct? Marshall is unstable and walrus is stable. आकांक्षा, नो एम्बिग्यूटी. प्रेफरेंसेस आर योर इच्छाएं. जो तुम्हारी इच्छा है, जो थोड़े बहुत तुम्हारे नाम का भी मीनिंग है, वो है प्रेफरेंसेस. एंड चॉइस इज व्हाट यू फाइनली गेट. You know, what you will choose, what you will buy. So what I prefer is what I will buy, but I will be constrained by price in the market and I will be constrained by my income. So choice is what I buy and preference is whatever I am willing to buy at any given price. Just think like that. All right, so we take it further. I can believe this is understood and I can hope all of you have taken it down. अच्छा, तो यस नो मिला के बोलते मुझे यो सुनाई देता है फिर. Alright, let's see this then. I'm just rubbing this side here. When both demand and supply curves are upward sloping and supply steeper than demand, you sort that out. 4B. Alright, अब ये ड्रॉ करने की कोशिश करो. यहां हमें पता चल गया कि वॉलरस स्टेबल थे और मार्शल अनस्टेबल थे पिछले केस में. Alright, in 4A we know that Marshall was unstable and walrus was stable. Now 4B is what I am giving you, that what happens if supply is steeper than demand. Alright, supply is steeper than demand. Like we did a case supply flatter than demand. Now I am changing it. I am saying what happens if both are upward sloping and supply now is steeper than demand. Alright, then how will you go about it? Let us see. I hope you are getting something similar. That price paid by buyer now to the left of QE is higher than price paid by seller. Marshall gives you a stable equilibrium, isn't it? We can say that at Q1 less than QE, PB is greater than PS. Therefore, quantity traded increases till it reaches equilibrium. At Q1 less than QE, PB is greater than PS. Therefore, quantity traded increases till it reaches equilibrium. I hope we are fair enough on that. And similarly, if you would have taken a quantity to the right of QE, say Q2, then the price charged by seller is greater than the price willingness to pay by the buyer, and there will be fall in quantity traded. At Q2 greater than QE, PB dash is less than PS dash. Therefore, quantity traded decreases till it reaches equilibrium. So it gives us Marshall stable, all right? It gives us Marshall stable, all right? And try drawing walrus, you will get it unstable. Try drawing walrus, you will get it unstable. Same thing again, supply is relatively steeper and demand is flatter. So if you take a price above equilibrium, at P1 greater than PE, S1 is less than D1, therefore excess demand and price rises. So we shift away from equilibrium. And similarly, if we take a price lesser than PE, then it will mean that there will be excess supply at P2 lesser than PE, S2 is greater than D2, therefore excess supply and price falls. That is the way it goes. So if we take walrus in this case, walrus is unstable. I hope we are okay on that. Correct. Marshall stable and walrus unstable. Absolutely right. All right. So, no, for a question, they will be very specific. You won't have to draw all the 4 cases. There can be a possibility where they can push you on more. In case there is a situation that arises which needs you to draw all 4 cases, in case there will be none otherwise, but it's possible there can be a situation where you need to draw maybe 2 or 3 cases. In such cases, just draw the figure and do what I have done. All right, just write that much. You don't have much scope to write. But do not compromise on the cases to be drawn in case they are asking you about different formulations, because then you will give an impression to the examiner that you don't know. All right, तो ये मत करना कि cases नहीं draw किए अगर वो सब कुछ पूछ रहे हैं तो. अगर सब कुछ पूछ रहे हैं draw कर दो और आंसर ऐसे ही लिख दो, तो आपका कम खर्च होगा टाइम और साथ में आपके स्पेस में ही कवर हो जाएगा सारा. But you will have to draw, 4 cases means 6 figures actually. So you'll have to draw 6 figures and on their side you keep writing, and the size of the figure has to be contracted. It's like 3 figures on 1 page. Normally they give you 2 sides to write a 150 word. So 3 figures on 1 page is what you will have to draw, and on their side you will have to write. So possibility, but less chances. Now you take a question. Yes. Okay. So if they ask you to analyze if vol ratio, if one stability means another, mainly pick on 2 possible cases, or 3 possible cases. One is say Marshall stable, walrus unstable. Pick another one where walrus is stable, Marshall is unstable, and then one where both are stable. All right, I'm answering a question that the way they asked you in the previous year paper, that when they asked you that critically analyze if stability of equilibrium in one case implies stability of equilibrium in another. In such cases, what you should be doing is, you should be analyzing them by taking 3 cases. Marshall stable, walrus unstable, Marshall unstable, walrus stable, and then both stable, showing that any of the 3 is possible. The point is that it's possible that one is stable, another is unstable, and it's possible that both are stable together. So we can't have a conclusion that whether one is stable implies another is unstable or vice versa. actually, you know what happens? They are, because if you show one case, you're just saying that, okay, it doesn't imply instability. When you show all the three cases, you're saying it doesn't even imply that that instability is a norm. Understand that it's also possible that both of them can be stable together. Also remember, in such answers, you should first of all spend the first 20 words, not more than that, but 20 words defining what is stability and instability of equilibrium. That stability of equilibrium is, if you disturb the equilibrium, the market forces will bring it back. You are back to your initial equilibrium. Instability of equilibrium is, if you disturb the equilibrium, then the market forces won't bring it back. All right, you will go away, further and further away from equilibrium. Now there is a question, you take that. You write, what are the differences between Marshall and Walras in their approach towards determination of market equilibrium. This is also a past year paper question that they had asked you. Remember, in this case, they are not asking you about Walras's general equilibrium and Marshall's partial equilibrium. Unfortunately, since many universities don't teach us that there is something called Marshall's partial equilibrium, so many of the people also I have seen, they take it as equilibrium of NCERT Marshall and general equilibrium Walras. एक दो जगह पे मैंने लोगों को ये आंसर देते भी देखा है सो कॉल्ड आंसर बुकलेट्स में, तो वो बचना. वॉलरस ने अपना पार्शियल इक्विलिब्रियम दिया था, मार्शल ने अपना, जो मैं आपको सिखा चुका हूं. आई हैव टॉट यू दैट व्हाट वाज मार्शल्स आइडिया एंड व्हाट वाज वॉलरस's आइडिया. सो व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट द differences will also be based on these two, as to how Walras's equilibrium was different from Marshall's determination of equilibrium. All right. Now the way you will write the answer, I'm making you write it. Please take that. You write, market equilibrium takes place when market reaches a point where both producers and consumers have no incentive to change either price or quantity in the market. Full stop. The equilibrium determination in partial equilibrium model in partial equilibrium model has two approaches. Has two approaches, comma, given by Marshall and Walras. The differences between them are and you can take that as ABCD 1 2 3 4, putting arrow whichever way you want to. First point, I'm saying the differences between them. First point, Marshall considered quantity adjustment. I'm repeating myself. Marshall considered quantity adjustment to be the main factor in determination of equilibrium, while Walras considered equilibrium price determination as the prime factor. Full stop. In the same thing you write, in other words, first ही point में लिखना आप इसे. In other words, for Marshall, quantity is determined. For Marshall, quantity is determined in the market which in turn INTURN wala intern which in turn automatically chooses price. I hope we are clear on that you first decide quantity and then choose what price at that quantity. All right. Again, connected. For Marshall, it was price as a function of quantity. So choose the quantity and that will choose the price for you. You right? And in case of Walras, price was determined in the market. Which automatically chose quantity. All right, you write the second difference then. According to Marshall, the second difference now. According to Marshall, Equilibrium determination is dependent on willingness to purchase and willingness to sell, willingness to purchase and willingness to sell of buyers and sellers in the market, while according to Walras, equilibrium is determined by auctioning, AUCTIONING. Equilibrium is determined by auctioning, that is choosing different price depending on excess demand or excess supply in the market. Then you write third, Marshall's theory is more extensively used. I'm repeating myself. Marshall's theory is more extensively used in durable commodity markets, because producers avoid competing in price. I'll tell you why. Because durable commodities are high cost production. So in that case, producers don't want to compete in price and minimize the price. So the producers compete in quantity. And that is why adjustments take their own time. So in durable commodity market, Marshall's theory is more extensively applicable. And the same thing you write, while FMCG market, FMCG is fast moving consumer goods. FMCG markets or financial markets like share market or exchange rate market. So our financial markets are more auctioning oriented and therefore Walras's theory is more applicable. And then you write one more. the different definitions, the different definitions to approach of equilibrium, the different definitions to approach of equilibrium implied that it is possible for one market to provide stable equilibrium when the other had instability. For example, if both demand and supply curves are upward sloping, then Marshall's equilibrium, you can take it from the board, it's in front of you. Marshall's equilibrium is unstable if supply curve is flatter. Marshall's equilibrium is unstable if supply curve is flatter, while Walras's equilibrium is stable in that case. Walras's equilibrium is stable in that case. Similarly, if both the curves are upward sloping, and supply curve is steeper, both the curves are upward sloping and supply curve is steeper, then Marshall's equilibrium is stable and Walrus is unstable. I mean his equilibrium. So Walrus's equilibrium is unstable. And then you change the paragraph, you will write the conclusion. You write, both the methods are valid. In choosing market equilibrium. Therefore, policymakers have to remain conscious. Regarding the type of market the type of market before using the method to reach equilibrium. I hope you are, see what I'm trying to do, and that's what I tried doing in my initial classes with you, is trying to give you an idea as to how to present the answer, how to structure it, like what should come first, what should come later. तो जो मैं तुम्हें क्लास में लिखवाऊँ ना, उसे बाद में भी देखो एक बार इस point of view से, that how did he structure it, what came first, what came later, what was the introduction like, what was the conclusion like. That gives you a better understanding of how to attempt answers when you will attempt them on your own. Alright, that is why I keep making you write all this in all detail, that you have an idea of how to present. Alright. Now there is another thing connected to equilibrium. There are two things actually, but we'll take them one by one. So you just write a question for today. I know that मेरा वक्त था, आपका वक्त पूरा हो गया. तो आप एक क्वेश्चन लिख लो. You write. जो लोग किताब बंद कर चुके थे उनसे क्षमा प्रार्थी हूं. But you take this. Explain existence and uniqueness. Explain existence and uniqueness of equilibrium. Explain existence and uniqueness of equilibrium. Now, just giving you a hint, we will discuss it tomorrow. But remember, when you say exists, the equilibrium exists, that means there must be at least one point where demand and supply curve should intersect. If they don't intersect at all, then there is no equilibrium. For example, if you have a situation where supply curve goes like this and demand curve goes like this. Now in this market, there can be no equilibrium for a simple reason that the buyer's highest willingness to pay is lesser than seller's minimum willingness to charge. And that is why you will see some very high luxury goods never produced in developing economies. Like say developing economy is not producing aircrafts. So why don't they produce aircrafts? Because the maximum willingness to pay of the buyers for those aircrafts will still be lesser than the minimum charges that the seller would expect. So in such cases, that commodity doesn't exist in such countries. You understand that? Because there is no equilibrium possibility. Similarly, if both the curves are suppose upward sloping, and if they're going like this, they never meet, means no equilibrium. Similarly, if both the curves are downward sloping and they go like this, no equilibrium. You understand that? So this is the idea of existence or non-existence of equilibrium. In such markets, no equilibrium exists. But yes, whatever we discussed till now, a demand and a supply equilibrium exists because they intersect at a point. In this market, the equilibrium exists because they intersect at a point. That is existence of equilibrium. Alright, so when they ask us about, and this is again a past year paper question, in 10 marks they had asked about existence and uniqueness. So I'm covering that up for you. So if they ask us about existence, this is the idea of existence. And uniqueness is that if demand curve and supply curve intersect only once, if demand curve and supply curve intersect multiple times, then again equilibrium is not unique. Understand that? For example, if suppose this is your demand curve, and if suppose this is your supply curve. For those of you who come with an economics background, you know that this can be a labor supply curve possible. Backward bending. Now, in this case, you don't have a unique equilibrium. There is a possibility of two points of intersection. So that is the idea of uniqueness of equilibrium if it exists. Alright, so remember, first question is, does an equilibrium exist? And the second question is, if it exists, is it unique? You understand that? Why? What happens if the equilibrium is not unique? Well, you are always in trouble which one point to choose. And whichever point you choose, whether it is stable or unstable, those questions start arising. So we will pick this up tomorrow, and I will also teach you Cobweb model of equilibrium. When we meet tomorrow. So hopefully that tomorrow's class should finish us up on that. For those of you who may not have read NCRT till now, please do make sure you have read indifference curves before tomorrow. Thank you. I'll see you then. Bye. Commodities are exchanged very quickly, Sandhya. That is why FMCG market is auction oriented. Yes, non-viable industry. Correct, Vikas? Okay, Deepthi, you can say that. Usurious practices is high interest rate charged, Anusha. And dualism is some people very efficient and some people very inefficient. Thank you. Bye-bye. You can write them in tabular form, Sandhya, not a problem. Partial equilibrium means the one we are discussing, Anushka. General equilibrium is when you assume everything else is not constant. If nothing is mentioned, then it's partial equilibrium, Deepthi. Yes, they reappear, Himanshu. Yes, you can label it like that, Deepthi. मुझसे कल ले लेना वो आंसर. आज मैं शीट ही नहीं लाया हूँ, इस पे भी नाम लिख दो जरूर. हाँ, इट बिकम्स ईजियर फॉर मी टू गिव इट बैक टू यू. बाय. Durable commodity like refrigerator, durable commodity like say computers, they are durable commodity. Acha, acha, acha. Do one thing. Just give me a second. I'll make you meet Samir sir. He will help you out with that. Or you do one thing. You just go at the back near the camera. You will see Samir sir sitting. Tell him that sir has sent me. He'll help you. That's okay. With yeah trends. Will do. Will do. Yes, that he said that, again, it was not correct in saying it, but he said that people buy thousands of commodity. So on one commodity, people spend not more than 2% of their income. So in that case, even if I assume constant marginality of money, it is not a problem because effectively on one commodity, the proportion is very small. All right. So he said that there should not be an issue because the issue will arise only if one commodity dominates a consumer's consumption basket. Dominates, then the utility of money will play a bigger role, because then with the buying of commodity, your utility from money will also start rising or falling. All right, that phase. Thank you, Shubham. Well, of course, in this question you don't need to Vigneshwaran, but otherwise you should explain Marshall and Walrus in detail. Zero implies equilibrium, Deepthi, neither a buyer nor a seller, self-consumption. If I produce 10 units, consume all myself, then I am a net. Then it is a zero part. I am neither a net buyer nor a net seller. Yes, yes. देखो प्राइस तो बायर और सेलर मिलकर डिसाइड करेंगे. हाँ बिल्कुल, कहीं पर भी, क्योंकि विलिंगनेस टू सेल के साथ विलिंगनेस टू बाई भी तो है. हाँ, दोनों के बीच में हो सकता है. उधर भी दोनों के बीच में, इधर भी दोनों के बीच में ही है. ठीक है. एट अ पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम. बिल्कुल, कोई रेंज नहीं. Yeah. Quantity. Yes. Opposite.
And when we talk about we should consider type of market by taking out equilibrium. So if for the same market we use different models, it will
Yeah, so it will give us different results, and then if we make policy based on that, we may end up making a bad policy. Yes, will be different. No, equilibrium point will be same, but in some cases you may never reach the equilibrium. As in, if you use Walrus's approach, and suppose it's an unstable situation for Walrus, you may never reach the equilibrium.
No, irrespective of stable or unstable,
Yeah, the equilibrium points will be same wherever they two intersect.
irrespective of the method,
Irrespective.
the same market.
Same market.
Be it durable or
Sure.
and for when we say willingness to pay is reflected by prices, that just applies to the card.
Yes. You can make a graph. Don't worry, Ashu. Just see the answers I am making you write. Gradually, you will be able to write it. Uniqueness is single equilibrium. Hemant, single equilibrium. Perfect, Devyani. Wonderful. Current affairs, I will also start discussing few parts with you. But my suggestion is try getting as much as possible. It will help you. That will help you. Yes.
Sir, there was a question that the Marshallian equilibrium analysis is more practical than the Wallachian equilibrium analysis. So how can we do that? Because of the time element of the Marshallian.
Who is asking this question? Wrong place. ये बात क्योंकि theoretically सही नहीं है. Like it's not that Marshall is more practical than Walrus. I mean, अगर मुझसे पूछो तो it should be the other way around. तो इसलिए हम उस पर conclude नहीं करते. ठीक है. हाँ, we'll talk about Marshallian supplies. We'll come along with this. नहीं ये है that ये मतलब मार्शल ही मानते थे that it will satisfy particular want. But point is that if I consume more, I will consume in combination. And Marshall did not assume anything as complements. हाँ, तो complementarity को नहीं assume. Explain कर.
willingness to pay की बात करते हैं तो MUX by MUM की बात करते हैं सिर्फ MUX
MUX by MUM. हाँ.
आपने कहा था MUM is independent of income और मतलब कोई rich या poor हमें तो उसको compare नहीं कर सकते
नहीं कर सकते.
अगर मतलब ऐसे मैं सोचती थी अगर poor का हम बोले poor का high MUM बट सर हम ऐसा भी पढ़ते हैं कि उनकी MPC ज्यादा है poor तो ये कॉन्ट्रडिक्टरी नहीं
नहीं MPC जो है वो इनकम ग्रुप पे आ जाता है, मैक्रो कंसेप्ट है. और MUM जो है वो माइक्रो कंसेप्ट है.
जनरली वो कोई poor person है तो वो ज्यादा MPC होगा
नहीं वही कह रहा हूं तुम्हें कि MPC डजंट रिफ्लेक्ट MUM. MPC ज्यादा मतलब मजबूरी है क्योंकि इनकम कम है तो इनकम का ज्यादा प्रोपोर्शन तो कंज्यूम करना पड़ेगा क्योंकि सरवाइव करना है. बट दैट डजंट मीन द पर्सन मे नॉट बी लाइकिंग मनी. You understand that? But you can't compromise your survival. Right? That way. I'll just take 1 second. Marshall is used in. No, you don't need to make any graph in the last answer. Marshall is used in durable commodity because it is quantity-based discussion that happens there, Deepthi. And wherever auctioning happens, there you use Walrus. Coke and Pepsi don't compete in price, Anuj, because they have an understanding that they don't want to disturb each other. But don't forget, they are FMCG, but with very high investment. All right, FMCG, but with very high investment. Yes, we will cover pre-independence part. I'll give you all the notes and few discussions also I will do with you. Willingness to more or less they are same, but don't use them interchangeably, Krishna. Yes. कल लास्ट टाइम दिया था, कल ले लेना बच्चे मुझसे क्योंकि आज मैं घर से आ नहीं रहा हूँ. आई लैंडेड एंड आई केम हियर इसीलिए. Because Coke and Pepsi do huge investments. So in that case, they are FMCG, but they are based on a market where they know that again quantity price-based competition will be more problem. See, normally you attach FMCG to less investment products. Small things like say a chocolate or an ice cream, etc. So in that, or say a toothpaste. So people don't do huge investments for that. But Coke and Pepsi are global brands. So they have made their brand investments and all. So that changes their scenario. So it's more like an exception in most of the markets for that purpose. But that comes handy in proving that you don't necessarily need like in the context which I had spoken, that you don't necessarily need multiple players for good competition in the market. Yeah, that phase.
सर जो इनवर्स डिमांड कर्व बोलते हैं मार्शल इनवर्स because हम प्राइस में फंक्शन ऑफ क्वांटिटी को ले रहे हैं
नहीं, प्राइस क्वांटिटी ले रहे हैं, लेकिन मार्शल ने ले लिया क्वांटिटी एज अ फंक्शन ऑफ प्राइस. अगर ड्रॉ करेंगे, मतलब प्राइस एज अ फंक्शन ऑफ क्वांटिटी, तो प्राइस होना चाहिए था, आई मीन क्वांटिटी अगर एक्स एक्सिस पे है तो वो है क्यू एज अ फंक्शन ऑफ पी. बट मार्शल तो कह रहे थे दैट पी इज अ फंक्शन ऑफ क्यू.
मार्शल बोल रहे थे पी फंक्शन ऑफ क्यू
हाँ, मतलब मार्शल ऐसे ही ड्रॉ कर रहे थे. देखो, जब तुम ड्रॉ करते हो एक्स एक्सिस पे ऐसा क्वांटिटी पी, तो एक तरह से तुम कह रहे हो दैट पी इज अ फंक्शन ऑफ क्यू, क्योंकि हम बोलते हैं ना वाई इज अ फंक्शन ऑफ एक्स. ठीक है, हाँ, लेकिन मार्शल कह तो रहे थे दैट क्यू डिटरमिन्स पी, आई मीन, है ना. बट वो ड्रॉ कर रहे थे, सॉरी, पी डिटरमिन्स क्यू, बट वो ड्रॉ कर रहे थे क्यू डिटरमिन्स पी. You see that? He was saying that P changes and then Q changes. But he was drawing Q along with P because he was deriving it from Q and marginal utility curves. All right. Come, let's go. That's it. We can sit in that room. Okay, online. I'll see you tomorrow, 2:50 again. Thank you.